Good idea. Love it.
Okay, we're recording, so we're good there. Hi, everybody. Facebook, we are live. Nice to see you. Bree with Apollo here. It's Friday. It's Beyond the Steps Day. We're chatting today with Dr. Chelsea Pirati and Chelsie Hightower about how we can instill mental toughness in our dancers while still validating feelings and emotions. I think this is a really important topic, something we don't talk about as much as I would ideally like to see. I think it's getting more traction now as we explore a healthier mindset for dancers in general. But there's a lot of things we want to talk about today, from the way that the dance studio culture is set up, this kind of hierarchy, right? That kind of breeds keeping your feelings to yourself. And then also what we know, that dancers are suffering a lot of trauma mentally and physically. There's a lot of things going on in the dance world right now that are traumatic, that are scary. And I think that having conversations like these help shed some light on it, help provide education, and help people feel like they're not alone. So before we get started, I want to remind you, this is an open conversation. We are learning. I am learning with all of you. My co-host and friend, Melissa McDaniel, is not here today. She is traveling again. So I get to talk to these lovely ladies all alone, but I want to hear from you. We want to hear your questions, your comments, your experiences. This is an open dialogue, and we want you to share this, share with your friends. Make sure people are watching these conversations. We're talking about things that are relevant right now, happening in the dance world, trying to create happier, healthier dance spaces for our dance community. And we need everybody to do that.
Yeah.
So welcome. Please put your questions in, and we'll get to those by the end of the episode. But for now, I'm going to jump in and introduce the Chelseas, because we're so excited to have them. We have Dr. Chelsea Pirati with us today. She was trained as a studio dancer in the Denver area and spent summers training with ballet companies, finishing her performance career as a professional ballet dancer. She was also a successful high school dance coach for over a decade, winning multiple state championship titles. Outside of coaching, she has a PhD in sports psychology, full-time instructor at the University of Colorado at Boulder. And as a mental performance coach, Dr. Chelsea provides digital courses and memberships to help dance educators learn and thrive. And you can check out her podcast, A Passion for Dance, at chelseapirati.com. And we will link all of this at the end of the episode as well. Dr. Pirati, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're so excited. So as a mental performance coach, right, you work with many different types of people, but it's clear that your passion is dance. Obviously, we all have that in common. And you particularly focus on educators. Why is mental health for dancers such an important conversation to have in the dance community, especially now? I feel like we're talking about it now more than ever.
Yes.
Why is the time now?
I think more professional athletes are starting to share, and it's opening the conversation, and we actually finally have a few male athletes that are even willing to share, which is a huge stigma breaker too. So It's the larger conversation is happening, which is great. But I do think specifically to dance, we have this culture of the show must go on, right? And we all lived it, grew it, did it. And like, I don't care if you're hurt. I don't care what happened during your day. Like, this show will happen and you will be a professional about it. And I learned a lot about being a professional and being, always put together in dance, which I appreciate. But I think the show must go on mentality comes at the cost of we don't pay attention to what that potential cost could be when we're expecting dancers to go on no matter what is happening, that you compete no matter what, that you are always present. And that cost can be too great if we're not careful.
Yeah. And we're finding that, right? We're learning that as we get older. There's not a ton of research that was done on trauma and how things affect dancers in the last 20 years. Now it's being done, right? But we're just starting to, with all of us, see the impact of what the dance industry has had on us mentally and physically, right? And so when you know better, you do better. And hopefully, again, conversations like the one we're having today will help make dance more accessible and safer and more comfortable for dancers going forward. So in addition to Dr. Chelsea Pirati, we have Chelsie Hightower. We are going to recognize her from lots of things, but she's from Orem, Utah. She was a fan favorite on Fox's hit TV show So You Think You Can Dance, where she competed and choreographed and appeared as an all-star. She moved straight from there to ABC's Dancing with the Stars, where she performed for 8 seasons. As a pro, her partners have ranged from Olympic athletes to world-renowned entertainers. She was nominated for an Emmy Award for her dance that she choreographed with fellow castmate Derek Hough. Chelsea has graced the cover of many national fitness and dance magazines, as well as being the face of Reebok's dance line, and has had the opportunity to endorse many national products. She's been touring the country for the last 3 years with Revive Dance Convention, who happens to be YPAD certified, so check them out. Teaching ballroom to ages 5 to 18 years old, and also performs still professionally everywhere. She started a company called Dance Elevated in 2016. She hosted Fox's The Place from 2018 to 2019 and played Tina Sparkle on the U.S. premiere of Baz Luhrmann's Strictly Ballroom this year. In 2020, she started Inside Out, which is a dancewear company aimed to encourage the next generation to know their worth. And we love her mission. Chelsea, welcome.
Thank you so much. And thanks for making it through all of that.
I've never heard that read. Yes, it's important. I want people to know who you guys are, what you've done. The people that we bring on are so legit. So welcome. And we appreciate you so much.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here.
You've had obviously an incredible career, and so much of that has been in the public eye. How have you been able to cope with the pressure that comes with all of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, the pressure ebbs and flows, and it depends on what I'm doing, and it depends on where I'm at. And so it comes in waves and it ebbs and flows. One thing that really helps me and has especially helped me in my professional career was knowing my why and remembering what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and what the purpose is behind it. That was crucial for me. At the end of the day, when you look at from Chelsea's standpoint, pressure is imagined. And so it's really just a accumulation of expectation. And so it's an effort to try and release that expectation, get back to your purpose and get back to your why. At the end of the day, if I'm doing things because I'm trying to impress or please other people, that expectation can mount, and that pressure can build. So for me, it's kind of almost forgetting about myself a little bit, coming back to my why and remembering my purpose. And
how, so honestly, like in all honesty, how long did it take you to learn that? Like, you've been dancing a long time, but like, when did you really get comfortable with that concept?
I don't know if that's ever it's an ever evolving concept. You know, when I was a young teenager, it was, I was doing one thing all the time. And so there was a specific focus and a specific practice of when I'm in the studio, how can I connect to my why? How can I more release the pressure that's around me? By the time I was, I think, 18, when I decided I really wanted to do something professionally, that was when I knew I had to get really serious about my mental state and get really serious about if I wanted to compete and perform under pressure, I'd have to learn how to do that at a very high level. And so that was both good and bad. It created a lot of rigidity in my mindset as far as couldn't make a mistake, it almost felt like. And so, but it was a practice of learning how to, every single day, practicing releasing pressure, and releasing that expectation, and me getting to decide what was good enough for me and not letting other people's expectations dictate how I felt about that. Now it's a very different practice because now I'm in a very different space of starting 2 different companies and learning what that means now to release pressure. I think it's always different, right? Like in each phase of life, you get to learn new tools to how to do the same thing ultimately at the end of the day. So now it's a lot of just learning how to love myself more. And again, just connecting with, I'm trying to think more about other people now and less about how perfect my performance is. And
I love that. And it's a great lesson. And it's not, I asked that question, not to get too personal, but only because I want people out there to hear it's not an instantaneous thing. It's not like you just decide that you're going to focus on your mental health and everything falls into place. It's a struggle. It's a journey. It's a learning process, and it's
which
something
is
we always have to
actually
work on. Yeah,
totally. Which is the cool part about it too, because it's this thing of life. We are ever evolving and ever changing. And I think sometimes we get into this mindset of like, well, I know I did. When I do it now, I'm never going to have to worry about this again. And that's just not reality. So it's cool at the same time to be able to go through different phases of life and learn new tools for each phase. So
thank you. And thank you again, both of you, for being here. If you missed it, I know people are popping on and off on everywhere. We have our friends on Instagram, Facebook, and Zoom. This is Beyond the Steps, and we're talking about, everyday issues that impact the dance industry. I have the Chelseas here, Dr. Chelsea Pirati, a performance mindset coach, and we also have a professional dancer, Chelsea Hightower, with us today. I want to start by put your questions and comments for them throughout this conversation in any platform that you're on, and we'll get those answered. I want to make sure to state that. And if you see me looking around, I'm not crazy, maybe a little crazy, but I'm monitoring all these different screens in front of me. It's not that I'm zoning out. I'm just trying to pull you in. So help me out, put your questions and comments in the chat, and we will get those answered for you. I'm going to start by talking about the culture of dance. I said this a little bit in our intro. Dancers are without a doubt the toughest athletes in the world, and they definitely encompass a balance of mental and physical toughness. But it's interesting because it could be argued that that same dance culture is set up to facilitate power dynamics and to declare war on a dancer's mind and body, right? So, Dr. Pirati, do you agree with that? And what is the biggest challenge you see in how the dance industry operates today in also keeping dancers mentally strong?
Sure. I think declaring more feels strong to me. And I think I always just take that positive look on it but yes, I do think the culture can be really dangerous, right? And it can go too far, but I think it's true. Kind of what I was saying at the beginning about that desire to be a professional, that desire to make sure it's perfect, which is the perfectionist issue that I think is one of the biggest things I see in dancers. That comes from our culture and even like, don't speak without being spoken to. I mean, that was my ballet world for a long time. Like, you do not talk in class. You do not ask questions. You do not, broach any of that. But that culture is designed for the professionalism side of it. And I do think that can go too far, and we can take that tradition too far. But there's a balance there. Like, we can still challenge our dancers, and we can still expect excellence. We can still expect growth, but you can do it in a way that is supporting them, rather than, I think what the culture has been in the past is like, I'm going to break you down to build you up. And that there's no need for that. There's no need to harm you to help you figure out how to do it. And, as Chelsea was talking about your identity and learning how to cope, like, you can help, your young 6-year-olds learn, and then you're going to have to reteach them and help them what to do in the teenage world and all the way into adulthood. So yes, it's a hard balance to be able to challenge and expect excellence, because dancers are driven and we want things to look good. If I'm going to put it out there, it better be good. And we can maintain that while like supporting your mental toughness in order to do that, rather than hurting you on the way.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I would love for you both to weigh in on this. There is something sacred and beautiful about tradition. And so it becomes a delicate dance of balancing tradition, like we were saying, versus what is actually good for us. Because not every tradition in dance, and we experience this with Apala every day, like, just because something is tradition doesn't mean it's good for you. We've evolved in our thinking. Science has shown us that things maybe that we did 50 years ago aren't so good anymore, and we need to change and evolve. Yet there's a resistance to evolving sometimes for dancers in that way, which is odd, because in art we evolve all the time as dancers and artists, and that's very natural for us to do. But when it comes to the traditions of the culture of dance, we've noticed people get a little bit stuck in the mud, right? So, Dr. Pirati, at what point does tradition become dangerous? At what point do you want to say to all those, the people who are upholding the traditions of dance that maybe are harmful, is there a point where it goes too far?
Yeah, I think the short answer is tradition goes too far if it's unchecked. So there's actually a lot of science on the value of tradition too, in that having a sense of legacy or having a sense of belonging that comes with tradition, right? Having, there's a lot of like that team building and I belong here. And as humans, we want to belong. We want that social connection, and traditions are part of that. You know, you belong to the world of dance, or you belong to that studio, you belong to that company. Like that can be really powerful and positive. But the danger comes when it's unchecked, when we just do it because it's what we've always done without pausing to say, is this serving us the way it used to? Is it still appropriate now, knowing what we know? As you said, things are changing. So I just think it's important that educators and the adults out there are checking their traditions. Is it still serving the way it's supposed to? Do we need to tweak it a little bit? Do we need to let it go entirely? Because as I said, traditions are good, and that sort of the cohesive part of it that brings us together. But if we don't check on them anymore, they tend to evolve a little bit, and they'll get like a little deeper and a little deeper and a little deeper. And then they can go too far if we don't pause.
I love that you bring up, they need to be checked. I think that's such a great way to say it. Traditions are good, but they also need to be checked on how we can evolve. Or is that still good for you? I think we talk about this a lot on the show about how, as dancers, directors and educators specifically, you know, in a studio environment, we get very caught on the hamster wheel of the year, right? Like, because we're always trying to stay one step ahead. We're always planning for the next thing. There is no off time. There is no, everybody says, well, when is your off time? There really isn't, because in the fall, you're planning for competitions, and for competition season, you're already planning for recital, you're already planning for the next year. So it just goes on, and it becomes easier to just go, I'm just going to do it the way I've always done it, because I don't want to like really sit down and like, changing your process means changing a lot of little details that you haven't had to maybe touch in a couple of years. You know what I mean? So it becomes easier to just stick with the norm.
Well, and it's like what Chelsea was saying about her why. That's what gets lost in tradition. I think that if we go too far in tradition and all of a sudden you don't check, does this still align with why I'm here, whether you're the dancer or the educator or the owner? Like, what is your why in that moment? And does that tradition still align? And it may not, and you have to be willing to let it go. Yeah,
that's a great point. That takes a lot of self awareness, right? We have a comment from Geology Guy: breaking your toes equals a tradition we can leave behind. I would say so. Yes, let's cancel that one out for sure. So Chelsea Hightower, what is the most dangerous thing you see happening consistently in the dance industry today that is having a negative impact on dancers' mental health? And what are some cultural values that you've had to overcome in your career to strengthen your own mental health?
Yeah, I think from the time we are kids as dancers, we're in the dance studio for several hours a day. And this is when we're still developing our identity. We're still developing who we are. And so a large part of who we are becomes who we are as a dancer. Or, you know, it's not just I am Chelsea who dances, it's I am a dancer. Right. And it becomes such a large part of our identity that when things don't go our way, our whole foundation seems to be shaken. I think that is a huge thing in the culture of dance. And that's one thing that I experienced on an intense level. I think growing up, how about my hair over here? Growing up, dance was everything to me. I remember my mom saying, you know, your life is so imbalanced. And I remember thinking I want it to be that way. That's exactly what I want. I want to be a dancer, and I want to be great, and I want to be successful. Now, the fallout of that is, yes, sure, that may have pushed me, but there was also a lot of fear underneath the surface, because I wasn't motivating myself from love and a strong foundation. I was really motivating myself many times from a place of fear. And I think there's quite a few dancers, and even speaking about the last question you asked, that are kind of coming on the other side of this and realizing, oh, that wasn't the best solution. Like, that wasn't the best way to approach things. And I think now the conversations are starting to be had of like, okay, well, what would we have done differently? I look back and I think, man, I would have done things differently, but at the same time, I did the best with what I knew. But now I can now kind of share what that my mistake in error was. And I will say there was, anyways, not to get too long-winded, but that's one thing that I I think is really, really important. And one thing that needs to be more awareness around is we are not dancers. We are people of individual worth and uniqueness. And we are all unique and perfect in the way that we are. And we are supposed to have weaknesses and we're supposed to have challenges. And dance is a beautiful art form that can be a catalyst to help us to become better people, but it's not, and help us to fulfill our lives, but it's really not who we are in its entirety. And so
I love that you bring that up, because I think there's almost like an embarrassment that comes with almost changing tradition and evolving. Is like, you have to admit that maybe what you were doing before wasn't the greatest thing. And I think people can get embarrassed about that. And we are really big on this show of trying to encourage every week, like, look, I was an educator for 20 some years. I was a director and a teacher and a dancer and all of those things. And on this journey that I'm on now of learning and educating myself, talking with people like you, both of you, I'm learning, like, look, if I could go back and redo some things, I absolutely would. There were some things I should not have done or said, or, different ways we could have approached things. But again, like you said, doing the best you can in that moment. And this concept of when you know better, you do better. Let's all give ourselves some grace. Let's forgive each other a little bit and forgive ourselves and go, but I can still do better now. Right.
Absolutely.
So I love that you bring that up.
Well, and I think just to add on to that really quick is I think that as a kid, you also just pick up on narratives that you think are true. And you don't know that they're not true. You just think, well, in order to be accepted by my peers, I need to be the best, or in order to be noticed or to be special, I need to be in the front of the class, or I need to be called up on stage. And I think you make these assumptions as growing up. I mean, we're talking about 9, 10, 11 years old, where you're competing in an art form that's very vulnerable and also competitive. And so there's a lot of room for error in the decisions we make about what's important and what's not. So
yeah, thank you. We have a couple of comments coming in from Geology Guy again. Nutrition, such a major part of being an athlete. There's a misconception that eating little or no calories is best, when in reality, a nutrition plan done properly is best. Absolutely. Thank you for that. We talk a lot about, we've had Kristen Koskinen on with us, Caroline Lewis-Jones. We've had a lot of people talking about nutrition and how important that is in a dancer's regimen, and well-rounded, healthy, full nutrition, and not the calorie counting that we so often hear about. So thank you for that comment. And we have another one here. I want to make sure I get to everybody because I appreciate you guys chiming in. So if you're just joining, I'm Bree with Apollo. We're chatting with Dr. Chelsea Pirati and Chelsea Hightower today about how we instill mental toughness in our dancers and still validate their feelings and emotions as human beings, right? That's a tough line to walk sometimes with the way that our culture is set up. So Chelsea, we're always told to be mentally tough, but that means something different to everybody. Is everyone's threshold different? And how do you know when you've pushed yourself to the limit? And that's directed at Chelsea Hightower.
That is such an interesting question, because yes, we're all different human beings, right? And like I said, we are all unique with our own unique challenges. And so of course, our threshold is going to be different for every person. For me, my burnout happened towards the end of Dancing with the Stars. It was I think, when you've hit burnout, when you're like, you don't feel much passion anymore for dance. You don't love it. When the stress far outweighs and on a consistent basis outweighs your love and passion for dance. Again, on a consistent basis, there's always going to be funks, and you're always going to go through those, those periods of time. But if it's happening over a consistent basis, I would say time to take a big step back and reevaluate. For me, that just meant we're going to just move home and we're going to just look at everything for a while. And that is when I started to kind of see the errors in my thinking and start to reshape what my foundation was. So
I think it's important to point out, this is coming from somebody who, people look at you and go, you have it all. You've done it all. You have the dream career. You had the dream job. So you think you can dance, Dancing with the Stars, and still something didn't feel right to you. And it's so important for kids to hear that, because I think in this world of social media and this idea of like presenting perfection all the time on social media, that even somebody like Chelsea Hightower is burned out and is mentally, it's challenging for her. So I think that it's really important for people to recognize this is happening on every level. I know it happens a lot with kids in high school and professionals, Chelsea, go ahead.
And I will say to that point too, a huge part of that burnout also was because I wasn't doing what I truly love for the reasons that I truly wanted to be doing them. And I think that's another huge thing in dance. I think sometimes we think, well, we have to, because there was a big part of me that was like, well, I can't just walk away from this opportunity. What are people going to think? And at the end of the day, if it's not resonating with my soul, and if I don't love it, then the bad is going to far outweigh the good. And not to say that I wasn't super grateful for the opportunity, but I do think, kind of going back to that why, and what there's so many different ways to be successful in dance. If we were to look at one person and say, well, that's the definition of success, and that's what we're striving for, we're putting ourselves into that's not honoring ourselves, and it's not honoring our own journey. We all can have different definitions of what it means to be successful in dance. It's an art form at the end of the day. And so I think that was one really big thing to just be really aware of, like, if it's not resonating with you, and if you don't feel like you love it, and you don't feel like it's serving who you want to be or what you want to do, then it's okay to take a step back. It's okay to find a new path, and to find that path that really does feel true to you.
And success in dance is so subjective, from everything that we do, from judging competitions to, the people that are sitting in an audience viewing something on stage. What does success really mean in dance anyway? Because there are different definitions of what that means for people, like we said earlier. So, Dr. Chelsea, what are some things? This is a three-parter. What are some things that you see happening regularly in the dance industry that are promoting unhealthy habits that you might like to see improved upon or changed? And as a director and teacher, how do you know when you've pushed a performer or student too far, and what do you do in that situation?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you can go a lot of directions. I want to just wrap up what Chelsea was saying too about identity and success, because that's when burnout happens when you are going for someone else's definition of success, or your own changed, which happens too, right? Like, so just checking back in on that and knowing what you're striving for. So for what I wish would change, or what I think that one of the bigger problems that I see, the regular habits that happen, is has a lot to do with self-talk and what teachers and directors are saying to their dancers. So one of my big mantras that I try to share with educators out there is like, what you say to dancers becomes their inner voice. So especially if you are treating really young dancers, as Chelsea was saying, they just adopt what they hear. They're just going to believe you. And if you are telling them things about their body, if you're telling them things that, oh, you have flat feet, or, oh, you're never going to be able to do this before, or you don't look the part, act the part, you're not a turner, you're not whatever it is that we say to people, these kids, it becomes your inner voice. It becomes your own mantra. And then it gets worse as we enter high school, right? Because then we're looking for validation. We're looking for that support from people, and we will attach to the language of our trusted adults in our life. Or if they're not even a trusted adult, just the adult whose praise means a lot to you when you're seeking validation and you're seeking that reward from them. So what I would love to see is change, as you asked, is being aware of your language, and that you're trying to help a dancer cultivate self-talk that's going to support them. So, self-talk is an ongoing thing. And we were talking about earlier, you don't just magically figure it out one day. You're like, now I'm good, and I never say mean things to myself. Like, we just do it. We say negative things to ourselves, unfortunately, a lot, and that can be the default. But the idea is to start practicing that positive self-talk, and as an educator, modeling that for them and helping encourage them with that. If you what to do, as you asked, like if you catch them saying negative self-talk out loud, which happens, right? When you'll hear the dancer, it's like, oh, I suck at this, or like, oh, I can't do that. And they will just say it out loud. And you're like, no, hold on. Let's not let that be your default. And the more you practice recognizing that negative self-talk, again, it's never going to stop, but you can recognize when it happens and pause. Like, where did that come from? Why is that real? Is that true? And usually it's catastrophized. It's way bigger than is actually true, right? And recognizing it, and then trying to say something more positive to yourself, trying to remind yourself of something different as the educator, putting that in there. And again, I'm not saying to like be fluff and extra, say fake praise, right? That doesn't help, but like the genuine contingent praise, so that dancers can learn the self-talk that they need. Because I think that's the tool that gets you through the intense competitions or the auditions, or, those really scary places where our mental state can get in our way as a dancer. The self-talk is what's going to save you. So helping them learn from a young age on how to do that and care for themselves that way. That's the life skill too.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so important. I hear that with my 8-year-old son all the time as he starts engaging in negative self-talk at 8 years old, and we are always stopping him going, don't say that. Don't say it. My daughter has all the confidence in the world. My son, it's different. And so it's interesting too, because every kid is going to be different in the way that they're approaching that.
Sure.
So,
and if I could add on too, I think outward confidence is great, but it doesn't always mean the self-talk is positive. And so that's hard with kids too. Not to like make you worry about your daughter now. She probably but
that's good. That's good to hear.
A lot of kids will, again, in dance, we're taught to like chin up and carry yourself well. And so the kids who figure that out and they get praised for that, right? They get praised for their confidence. They get praised for going up to the front of the class, and they get, so they learn to walk the walk and present themselves that way. But then the perfectionism can actually get worse. It's like, well, now this is what I'm supposed to be. And if I don't feel that way today, I can't say anything because now, it's not, people are going to be disappointed in me, or it's not what I'm supposed to do. So I think having conversations about self-talk, regardless of what you see on the outside, is an important part for our kids.
Can I just add on to that too? This idea of like, we have to walk around and put this mask on and be perfect because we're competing all the time is also, to one of your questions, Brianne, is also such a rampant thing that we see in the industry. I remember feeling that way all the time, of feeling like, oh, I can't it's tough to be vulnerable, or it's tough to just be me with imperfections, because it's this feeling that you have to be, you have to put this mask on and just be inhuman in certain ways, or just to just not show vulnerability or weakness. And I think that is something that I'm like, man, if we could overcome that part as well, and like, hey, let's take our masks off and just be
real for once. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And that's going to come from, as we were saying, like us that lived it. About it. They're like, I wish there was something different. You can model that and you can share that. But
I also think that's a challenge that we have to figure out how to overcome with social media too. I think that definitely contributes. There's some awesome things about social media and the way it connects all of us, but there's also some things that are really harmful for kids if they're not equipped with the maturity to deal with the fallout from social media and the natural feelings that are going to come up, and they don't have somebody putting them in check. Right. So,
and growing up with that.
Yeah. We didn't grow up with that. So can you imagine?
We know that
I didn't. Like Chelsea Hightower, you might have, but I didn't.
Mostly not. Yeah.
And that wasn't a thing. Like you didn't have to worry about going to class and getting filmed, or you didn't have to worry about filming TikTok videos or people judging, seeing something online and critiquing you in a not nice way. So
it's almost an extra effort to be aware of that and to be cognizant of that and to know that, to
100%. I don't know. Speaking of masks and faces, there's some crazy thing going on with my installation on Instagram. So this is just, I don't care. As long as
noticing that.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I don't know. But anyway, you can see the Chelsea. So we're just going to roll with it. Mama Beck says, I agree with what Chelsea said. As a parent, I am all in as long as she is loving it. The minute she doesn't love it, we would reevaluate. And I think that was a Chelsea Hightower. And then such good advice on the positive talk, Dr. Pirati. People are loving that. So Yeah, thank you. And Dr. Pirati, or Dr. Chelsea, before we move on to the next question, I want to go back because I think this is important. As an educator, if you've realized you've pushed your student too far, what do you recommend doing in that situation? Because I was always big on like, okay, acknowledge, apologize, and let's move forward. But always apologizing. Yet there's some people that feel like I don't have to apologize. Like, what is your advice on that?
Sure. I think this actually ties really well into what Chelsea just said, that your reaction, I think if you're not sure what to do, think about what would you want that dancer to do if they said something that hurt another dancer? What would you want? Like, you want to model what you want them to do. And that usually means being vulnerable and saying, I was in a bad place in class yesterday. I know I raised my voice, or I know whatever it is that you said, and recognizing it, acknowledging it, apologizing for it, and that you didn't want to do that. And then I think the next step too of like, this is what I promised to do to be better, or this is what I'm going to try to do. But it's part of that vulnerability of I'm not okay with how I showed up yesterday. I want to be better than that, and I'm going to work on that for tomorrow. And I appreciate that with you being with me. And we're ultimately modeling for our dancers, like, they're going to make mistakes too. They are going to say something mean to a peer when they didn't mean it to be mean, but then it comes across nasty. And we want to model how to help those situations, and how to have hard conversations, and how to admit when you were wrong, and how to make up for it. And so I think the best you can do is, as you said, like, acknowledge and apologize, but go ahead and be a little bit vulnerable. There's a balance as the adult in their lives of letting them know that you're there for them and you are solid and you know what's going on, and you can be a place of security for them. But you can be a place of security without being perfect. And that's that ultimate, I think, balance that we need to show them, as Chelsea was saying about this mask, is like, I want you to trust me, and I want you to believe in me, but I'm also not perfect, and that's okay. And modeling that for them.
I love that. So thank you. And if you all are just joining, I'm Bree with Apollo. We're chatting with Dr. Chelsea Pirati and professional dancer Chelsea Hightower today about how we can instill mental toughness in our dancers while still validating their own feelings and emotions as humans and individuals. Chelsea Hightower, this summer, Simone Biles made the decision to withdraw from Olympic events, and really took the step in valuing her personal health and safety over winning and performance. Part of your mission with what you do with Inside Out, your dancewear line, is you want to help dancers know and understand their worth. Do you think that low self-worth and or low self-esteem is what keeps dancers from taking a stand in favor of their own mental health?
Just say that one more time.
Do you feel like low self-esteem and having low self-worth is the thing that kind of stands in the way for dancers feeling like they can advocate for themselves in terms of their own mental health? So with their instructors, with their educators.
Like in a situation with Simone, how she chose her own health and over the Olympics. First of all, I think that I know there's been a lot of differing opinions on that. A lot of people were upset about that. But coming from an industry like dance, where it is very, very competitive and very subjective all at the same time, your mental health is everything. And so for her to value her own self-esteem and her own worth over the sport of gymnastics actually shows to me a lot of maturity. And I think is a great example of like, hey, we're not advocating give up whenever things are hard, but we are advocating this idea that we're important as human beings, and our mental health is more important than a sport. And again, I don't know all the ins and outs of that. And so I'm sure there's some sort of balance there, but I do think that it's a good thing. I do think that is a very good and interesting question. And I think that oftentimes it kind of goes back to that same idea of putting other people's opinions of ourselves in front of our own opinion of ourselves. In a sport where you're constantly being judged for your art form, it is very vulnerable, and it is very easy to do that. It's very easy to say, well, I'm good if that judge says I'm good. I'm good if my teacher says I'm good. I'm good if my friends think I'm good. But learning how to put our own opinions of ourselves and our own self-worth first before the opinions of somebody else is a really healthy step in a tough industry. And so I would say, I'm sure that that's the case. I'm sure that that happens a lot. I know for me, I've been a victim of that many times. And even in my adult life, I'm learning how to put myself first. And again, an ever evolving practice, something that likely through the rest of our lives, we're all going to be, practicing and working on. But most likely, I would say absolutely more heightened in this industry in dance.
Well, and I think if I can add that there's a really important distinction between mental health and mental toughness, and they're not the same thing.
Talk about
I think
that.
that's where I think that's where people got mad at Simone, that I was trying to help, as a lot of psychologists were talking about it at the time, of like being an advocate for your mental health doesn't mean you're not mentally tough, right? It doesn't. So that's where I think people thought she was just giving up because she was, quitting and didn't have the grit to push through. I'm like, clearly she did. If you've seen her career, she has more grit than the rest of us. So that mental toughness piece mental toughness is being able to, regulate your emotions when, you're in high pressure situations and push through. But mental health is very different, right? When you're actually caring about who you are and your worth and that side. So I guess just keeping in mind that they're different, right? So that, yes, if you're struggling with your sense of worth, it's going to affect your mental toughness. It's hard to pull that off if you don't truly believe in yourself, but they are different. So someone who is taking care of their mental health as a dancer, it doesn't mean you don't have that toughness or that you never will again. Like they're separate things.
Right. You can still be mentally tough and be struggling with your mental health. That they're not mutually exclusive, right?
Right.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And we've got a comment. Long Live the Dog says, can we call it something besides mental? It's designed to judge and demean. It's not kind or nurturing. It's a dangerous campaign. Yeah, I think Dr. Chelsea just outlined that really nicely with her, differentiating between mental health and mental toughness. I think what she said is we need to keep that in mind. They're two very different things and they don't mean the same thing. And I think we get caught up in that a little bit and lumping them together. But yeah, thank you for your comment. We're going to go on to the next segment because I think this is important that we identify, okay, what do we do about all of this now? Like we've identified an issue. We're talking about what it means, but what do we do, right? So how do we get there? Is it possible to strike a balance between respect for the process and the art and the hierarchy of dance, right? While also giving credence to how dancers are feeling emotionally. Dr. Chelsea, what are some things educators should be doing? You've already mentioned, correcting the self-talk and making sure that the way we're speaking to them is the way we would want them to speak to themselves, right? But what else should they be doing let's talk about at the professional level, because I feel like there's different things we should be doing at every level to make progress in this area. But professional, what should educators, choreographers, directors, employers be doing to advocate for positive mental health for their dancers?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as you said, it's a balance. And I think there's this balance between challenging them and taking care of them. But I think we don't want to swing so far that we're coddling people, because I think a lot of us would say as dance, I've learned a lot of really strong life lessons because of the challenges I've overcome as a dancer, but you can challenge with support and love, right? So I think the old school version of challenge was a lot more of the harsh language and the intensity and the, expecting extremes physically and mentally that we don't need to do. But instead you can still present challenges that might be a really challenging piece of music or a really challenging bar combination, or, things that are going to push you mentally and physically, but then you're doing it while saying, I believe in you. I wouldn't give you this solo music if I didn't think you could do it. I wouldn't, having that praise and conversation, but you're still challenging. Because I think ultimately we're talking about a growth mindset and trying to help dancers, be able to believe that challenge is good, believe that overcoming challenge. They have the ability to overcome any challenge that comes their way. And dance is such an amazing venue to be able to do that, right? Like it teaches kids how to go through that. And then it teaches adults how to go through and, believe that they are capable in the face of challenges, rather than taking a challenge as like, oh, I might not be able to do it right away, so I'm going to shrink and forget about it. And that's the perfectionist side, right? If I can't be it perfect, if I can't do it right away, I'm not going to try. And we want to help dancers learn you can make mistakes. Mistakes are okay. We have this one tradition that I do really like about the dance world of clapping when somebody falls. That is there a lot, like they're going across the floor and they might fall, and we just support them in class. And I think we've kind of lost why we do that. But I think it's helpful, just that reminder that like mistakes are okay and you learn from them, and how did you grow, and kind of doing that self-reflection. What am I really proud of in this last performance, and what do I want to be better next time? And that growth mindset piece. So to your point about what educators can do and professionals, it's cultivating that growth mindset by presenting challenges that are within the realm of possibility, but challenging you. It's the Goldilocks, not too hard, not too easy, just right, but it's going to push you, but doing it and while you are also believing in them and supporting that, the positive praise that's going to help them believe that they can do it too.
What do you think at the professional level I'm talking about? I think there's an overwhelming amount of anxiety and fear that comes with, if I don't push through this, I'm going to lose my spot. I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to, I'm going to, somebody else is going to take. Why is my phone ringing? I don't know. I have it on do not disturb. Not sure. But I think there's this fear, right? So what can we as directors do? Because that fear comes from somewhere. It's not like people just woke up and made this up, one day that this is a thing, right? It comes from somewhere. So what can we do as educators and directors and choreographers to reassure our dancers at the professional level? Like, look, the most important thing is for you to take care of yourself. This will be here, like when you get back, like, but preserving that and kind of easing that stress or worry, or is that too blurry?
No, I think you can talk about it. And that's part of it, is talking about it. And I think we're starting to get to a place where people will say like, no, I believe in, like, take care of your mental health. And if you're not right, but we don't often say it. And to Chelsea's earlier point, our dancers professionally have come through this world of all the stories they've heard and everything they've adopted along the way. So by the time they are a professional, they may have a picture of what's expected of them and what's acceptable and what's not. And it might not align with that director. And if the director truly believes in this balance, being able to actually talk about it is huge, because I don't think we talk about it. And so if the assumption is that that's not okay, unless you address it otherwise, unless you're able to share that you truly feel differently. And we're still trying to have more and more of that in the professional realm, and have people in power be willing to say how they feel about it and admit that they truly do support it, and then back it up. And not treat different dancers differently, as far as like your most talented dancer gets one thing while your, back row core dancer gets something else, right? Like if you truly treat them all the same, then that message comes across too.
Yeah. Thank you. And then Chelsea Hightower, what, two-part question, what should dancers be doing to help themselves? And if we have parents at home, especially of minor children that are watching, how can they help? Because it's not just what happens in the studio. It's what happens at home when they're at home, when they leave and get in the car from a long night of dance. What are some things parents can do to help? And what are some things that we can be encouraging dancers, young and old, to do for themselves now, to better advocate for their own mental health, which then leads to stronger and better, consistent mental toughness, right? Oh, Chelsea.
I'm sorry, which Chelsea you're talking about?
Chelsea Hightower, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Hi. Do you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I somehow got off of the Instagram live, so if you can put me on that, I can like see your lips moving, but
hold on. I'm accepting you.
Perfect.
Oh, there you are.
Okay.
Okay, good.
I am back. Okay. So obviously I'm not a parent, so I can't speak to parents, but I can speak to my own experience and what I believe is really important as a dancer, and what a dancer can receive from a parent is just unconditional love and support. I think they get enough criticism, or not criticism, but corrections in the studio. I think it's really important that the parents are just there to love and to say, for me, I know in my journey, questions like, how are you feeling? Are you doing okay? How, where are you at? And really understanding where they're at, that can go such a long way in helping them to build emotional resilience. And like, Chelsea was saying, that mental health aspect, and then the mental toughness can come when they choose it. I think that's a really important thing. You can't force that upon your kids. They get to choose that, and they get to feel the satisfaction of feeling like they overcame something. But if they have that strong support at home, I think that is huge and so beneficial. And that's the best thing I think that a dancer can receive from a parent, is just that support.
That's so true. And the science tells us the majority of athletes quit in the car ride home. And they quit because of that conversation. And it's even well-meaning parents, but the questions are the opposite of what Chelsea was just saying. The questions are like, they're asking a dancer, did you get that spot? Did you get a solo? Did she get a highlight? Why did she get that? And they are asking the competitive questions, or they're asking that, putting you against other dancers, or did you get noticed today? As opposed to, how are you feeling? Did you have fun today?
That's a great point. That is a great point.
Most kids quit on the way home. So to the parents out there, keep that in mind.
Yeah, thank you. I have more to add, but that's a whole nother call. So I'm just
Parents is a whole other thing.
I'm not gonna say it. I'm just gonna move on to homework. So we like to give homework every week. What do you want to challenge our listeners, our viewers, to work on to make progress in their own mental health and their own mental toughness between now and next week? So in the next 7 days, each of you give one piece of homework, and let's start with Dr. Chelsea.
Sure. I think if I would leave one piece of homework to try this week is to think about your self-talk, and that depending on where you are in your mental health journey, that could be just noticing how much negative self-talk there is. It could just be, noticing that, writing it down, paying attention to it. If you've been doing that kind of thing or working for a while, it could be more intentionally replacing negative with positive, or being aware of what you're saying out loud and what the people that you love are saying. So cater that to where you are in your own journey, but think about your self-talk for the week.
Love that. Thank you. We're going to do that. And Chelsea Hightower, your homework for the week.
Oh, mine would probably be somewhat of an addition to what Chelsea said. Just learning to love yourself. I think having this safe place to land for yourself, not judging yourself for a bad, pirouette, trying to learn to just accept all the good and all the bad, and or all the bad, know that all the bad is leading you to something good. But just learning to have that foundation of love for yourself. And does that make sense?
Yeah,
no judgment. Accept it all. That would be
Thank you. And we're going to give you additional resources right now. We have our Steps initiative course that you can take for free. This is a virtual course that we've curated with experts in every field. It's going to tackle things like racism, gender inequities, sex abuse and prevention, nutrition, psychology, and of course, our favorite, dance, medicine, and science. This course is completely free. It lives on our website. So I'm going to pop that link in the conversation as soon as it's over, and put that in the chats as well. But you can, again, log on and take that for free. Education is the most important thing you can do for yourself as a parent, a dancer, and educator. So please keep educating yourself. There are tons of resources out there. Also from people that are here today from the Chelseas, they have things to offer. Our friends at YPAD do an amazing certification course. We're going to give you 25% off a YPAD certification. There are YPAD certified conventions and competitions out there for you to go to. Adrenaline Dance, Revive Dance, Revel Dance Convention, and Guidance Dance Experience are all YPAD certified events. They are people that are doing the work. There are a lot of things going on in the industry right now, And again, that's another call, another day, but I will tell you the information is out there. You have to look for it. You have to be vigilant. You have to make sure that you're doing your own research and not relying on the people around you to provide you with information. Please do your research and know what's going on with your child. Dr. Chelsea Pirati actually provided a podcast to go along with this, a podcast link to go along with this conversation about growth mindset. And Dr. Pirati, just tell us a little bit about what they're going to get when they listen to this podcast episode.
Oh, sure. So my podcast is A Passion for Dance, kind of talking about mindset, resilience, and motivation, right, as dancers. And I speak to the educators, but I've heard from a lot of educators who listen that they just share it directly with their dancers, which I think is great. So you feel free to share it too. This specific episode is again about growth mindset. So a little what we were just talking about of what you can do as an educator. So there's, actual, a list of phrases, like if you're trying to get this across, here's what you say. If a dancer is actually not doing very well, but you're trying to find something encouraging to say, or the ones who are improving and the ones who are struggling, I'm giving you that kind of concrete.
I love that. I think that's
say.
So helpful for so many different reasons. I hope people take advantage of that and watch or listen to that. Thank you so much. And tell us a little bit before we go, what do you, just a quick recap, what do you guys have coming up that you want to talk about? Chelsea, I know you're working a lot on your dancewear line. Anything you can share with us?
Yeah, check it out, inside_out_dance on Instagram or danceinsideout.com. I am just so happy and thrilled to meet people like you guys. I've spoken to both of you individually about this, that believe and are trying to do the same thing and trying to be a voice and an advocate in an industry that just, it needs it. And an industry that needs some of this education. And so I'm, right now in the dancewear space and dance camp space. So you can check out danceelevated.com, which is dance camps that's centered around providing a safe place, providing a place of instilling some of these principles that we're talking about. And then Inside Out, which is, we have just little messages on the inside of the clothing that helps dancers to establish.
What's the website, Chelsea?
Danceinsideout.com.
See, I had it wrong.
Yeah, that's all about, we just want to be that extra reinforcement of these good principles. And if dancers can put on a leotard and on the inside, it has that little reminder of that healthy mindset that we are speaking about and trying to create a little wave in this industry about, that's our goal. And that's what we're trying to do. So
them hearing that from somebody like you is so cool. And it just keep on keeping on. I know it's a challenge building a business regardless, but I know you do not have to tell me. I know.
It is.
I have all the good vibes your way. And Dr. Pirati,
so
what do you have coming up that you want to share with us? Anything that you can share, projects?
Sure. I think my podcast is kind of my main focus right now, and just being able to share that message. So I would love to check it out, Passion for Dance, wherever you get your podcast. I would love to see you there. And otherwise, I love speaking and workshops. So I travel and do virtual workshops with studios or teams. You consult with
studios, right? Like they could reach out to you. Okay.
Yeah. So I love being able to bring the message into the specific studio and whatever might be your focus and your need kind of throughout the season.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you both so much for your time, for spending this afternoon with me and talking about this. I think you guys have so much knowledge and experience to share in your own right. And so just to hear this message from people like you is so important. We're going to share this and blast it out. But I really want to thank you for spending your afternoon with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you. It's so wonderful to have like-minded people be able to talk about this. So
Lincoln elbows, having the conversations. We're going to be back next week, Friday, November 5th. It's November already. It's so crazy. 2 p.m. Eastern. We're talking with Nicole Perry next week. And we're going to talk with her about another really great topic. We'll release the promos next week, but I hope you join us. I hope you come back here. We're having these conversations, like I said, every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern. And we hope to see you there. So again, Friday at 2, Beyond the Steps. We will see you there. Until then, we hope you continue your journey beyond the steps. Have a good one, guys. Happy Halloween weekend.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Ladies.